Hello YouTube, my name's Rob Pollard. This is a very, I guess, short video to show off some of the progress in Ancient Armies. Been really hard at work over the last 2 months, although it's one of those pieces of work where there's not really much new to see, although I can show you obviously the new bits. So what we'll do, I'll load up an older version of Ancient Armies so I can show you some of the differences between the old and the new. So here's the original. Let's load that up. I have a test scenario here. Let's pull that in. I'm going to turn off command and control and line of sight so we can see everything. So there you go, that's loaded. So this is the original Ancient Armies from a build of about 2 months ago, maybe a month ago, I don't know. And this build had a few issues which I kind of ignored until I had to deal with them. I can show you those right now. The first one was text scaling. I always found that the text was a little bit too small, especially on the larger units. And I think for a game like this, you want your text to be relatively large to make it easier to read. So although bottom left it shows you what you're hovering over, it can be quite hard to read when you're zoomed out. Although my intent is to add a little zoom window at some point to make unit identification easier. But yeah, if you look, you can see that the text isn't taking advantage of the space that's available. Now the other issue with the text on the scaling front is that when you deal with really small units, and I put together a fairly realistic Roman legion. You have 2 sets of maniples here. This one's on the maniple in a line, here it is in column, which is how I think they probably fought in real life. Behind them are the Triarii, I think that's how you pronounce them. Now the Triarii are really small units, they only consist of 60 people as opposed to the 120 of the Princeps and Hastati. But as you can see, the old text system isn't handling that very well, and you're getting lots of overlap text, and it's not scaled properly either. So yeah, there were issues with the old text system. Now I kind of put that down to technical debt. I wasn't going to address it right away because I've just got a higher priority thing to do, in this case column movement. But the work on column movement forced me to have to address that, and I can talk to you later about why that is. But the other downside of the old system as well was the scaling of the flags. Now on an infantry unit, the flags, they're kind of alright. Now these flags represent whether there's a leader embedded in that unit. Leaders and commanders, they can be embedded or actually on their own, but here they're embedded. Now when you look at a larger unit, because the flags in scale, the flags look really small in comparison and quite difficult to spot. And if you get to something even large like a chariot formation, look at that, the flag's barely visible. So again, that's the thing I wanted to address. And there were a few other minor bugs which I discovered as I started coding the column system, one of which being that the rhomboid calculations were incorrect. Now I guess my first clue to that is when I was reading ancient accounts, the Thessalian rhomboid formation was described as being lozenge shaped, and when I looked at ancient armies, well, that doesn't look lozenge, it kind of looks very squarish. I kind of put that to the back of my mind because I thought my calculations were correct and that's how it genuinely looked. But as you'll see when I load at the newer system, these calculations were in fact wrong. I think in part because I'd kind of copied a bunch of code from the wedge formation stuff, and wedges and rhomboids, that they're not quite calculated in the same way. But you'll see the fix for that when I load up the new system. So that's the old system there. So what we'll do, we'll load up the updated one. Now a lot of work has gone into this over the last month or so, a lot of it architectural, which is why you're not going to see too much new stuff, but it's architectural stuff that I had to do, because if I didn't do it I'd just run into many problems. So here's Ancient Armies loaded up with a new system. At first doesn't look like much has changed, So only when you zoom in you start to see the differences, and the first difference is the text. It's now sized a lot better, and in fact in the new system the text is it's kind of like its own model now, so that I can do lots of advanced stuff with it, including clipping and all sorts. I'll show that later. But it also gives me very precise positioning of the text. Now, doing the text was a right pain in the ass, because these units, they're all sized based on the dimensions and spacings that you put in the Army editor, so that these unit sizes aren't random sizes, they're actual proper calculated unit sizes. So you're actually seeing genuine sizes calculated as well as I can do with the system. This poses problems for text in that the system has to automatically scale the text to fit what space there is, and the calculations for that can be quite involved. And the other issue is that although this text looks like normal text, because we're working with DirectX here, everything's actually composed of triangles. I can kind of show that if I open up my dev environment. Now here I've set it up for wireframe mode. Let's run that up. And you'll get to see how everything looks really in terms of I guess the calculations that are going on under the hood, because everything in Ancient Armies is vectorized. That's why you can zoom in as close as you want. Like you see, everything's made up of triangles, and calculating all these triangles can be a pain. But yeah, if we look at the text, you can see that the text itself is composed of triangles, so it's not as trivial as you think it might be. And when you couple that to the fact that some of the underlying DirectX stuff there is buggy, in that, for instance, if you were to change the font size on this, it makes no difference whatsoever. So I had to effectively create my own text classes which sized properly, and that was a challenge in of itself. So you see, though the graphics in Ancient Armies looks simple, it's actually quite complex under the hood, but this complexity is needed in order to give us that ability to zoom in without any kind of graphics breakup. So that's enough of the dev mode one, let's put that away. So yeah, back to the original Ancient Army. So obviously text has improved, and if we were to go back to the Romanesque units, you can see that the Triarii now properly scaled and positioned, because the new text system it scales a lot better, positions a lot better as well. There's still, I guess, some fine tweaking to do to make things look good for a variety of unit sizes. I mean, maybe the text there is a bit too big, but notice that it automatically scaled this text to fit the available space, and it's done, I think, a pretty good job of that, and that's something the old system wasn't too good at. And again, looking at the wedge here, you can see it's taken advantage. And again, the flags, you see they're now scaled properly, so larger units, the flag's larger and it is more visible. You can see it there, the cavalry, and if we pop into the infantry unit, you can see that this infantry unit with the leader, the flag's there, and it scales properly. Now if you look at the Allied cavalry here, the Thessalians, their rhomboid formation is now calculated correctly, and I only knew that because one of the things that the column formation stuff does, which I'll show you in a second, is it strips the units off so they can go into the row column. I'll show you that in a second. But whilst doing that and sorting out the code for the rhomboid, I noticed some rather large discrepancies in the in what should have been the calculated values and what actually was the calculated values. So after investigating that, I fixed it, and lo and behold, the Thessalian cavalry kind of appears a bit more squished than the on the older version. But I've checked these figures by hand. In fact, I wonder if I've got, yeah, I actually created this Word document where I actually recreated the units and did a whole bunch of measurements. But either way, it is accurate, and also more of a lozenge shape, as you hear the ancients describe it. So that's probably a good thing as well. So yeah, doing the text stuff took a lot of time. In the old system, text was kind of created on the fly and had all sorts of clunky code around it, whereas here I actually created my own text class and added a lot of advanced functionality to it. But that also, in order to do that, I also had to completely redo the Ancient Armies model system as well, and that took up most of the month. But I've ended up with a much more powerful system and a much simpler system to code. And when you're coding something as advanced and as complex as an ancient battle simulator, you want your code to be simple, because you don't want to be fighting it when you're adding in the additional functionality. So although it cost me a month of development, I'm kind of happy with the results. Anyway, on to the new functionality. In fact, before I do that, let's rig up some telematics so that we can see some of the values. So let's run up the telematics app. So minimize that. Is it that one? So we are development telematics. All the telematics does is it allows me to see some of the I guess hidden information from the game. So what we're going to do, we'll get that to, it's now listening. So let's go back to the game. Let's turn on its telematics. That's now on. We go back to telematics. It should have detected it. There we go. It's connected. It's detected the armies. What we're going to do, we're going to look at some of the details for. Let's go for infantry 1. We'll do 2 for infantry 1 and 2 for infantry 2. So I've set some bits up. Now you can have multiple graphs on the same track, but I thought in order to avoid confusion I'll separate them. So we want fatigue in that one, we're going to measure cohesion in that one. Same for infantry 2, fatigue and cohesion. Whoops, that's heading, don't want heading. I want cohesion. Right, so that's all set up. We'll leave that in the background. Right, so Ancient Armies has always shown cohesion damage to a unit. You see it as like little, I guess, holes appearing in the unit, and the more cohesion damage it took, the more holes you'd see. But one thing it never fed back to the player was what was happening on the fatigue front. So I've updated the code so that as a unit gets more fatigued, its colour gets, I guess, whiter and whiter and whiter. And the idea is that a player can then look at units and see how fatigued they are, which I think is a handy thing. The other thing that happened, or the other change, is with the original Ancient Armies, it didn't really, I guess, care about fatigue in that you could keep fatiguing your units on and on and on until they got to some seriously fatigued states. Whereas this new system, it now tops off at 100, so when you're at 100% fatigued, a unit will just stop and not take any further fatigue, and we'll show you that now. In fact, you even see the units slow down as they get knackered. Now, the difference between infantry 1 and 2, I've kept their training levels the same, but the differences are infantry 1 has a heavy armour and a large shield. Infantry 2 is completely unarmoured and has no shield, so what we're going to do is going to get them to charge, because that's where your fatigue goes. Let's send them up towards the Romans. Speaking of the Romans, the one thing that surprised me about them is how small the units were, and also many textbooks seem to give the impression that the third line, the Triary, kind of covered the width, but it can't do, because they're like 60 men as opposed to 120, and say Ancient Armies calculates these sizes pretty darn realistically, so that's pretty much what a Roman legion would look like. But yeah, very surprised at how small their units actually are. But that gives them advantages like wheeling, you can wheel faster and so forth, but that's for another video. Anyway, so we set up these two units to charge. So let's get them going. There we go. I see the unit without armour and shield is pulling ahead. It's taking some cohesion, you can see that. In fact, they're both taking cohesion. Now, infantry unit 1, you can see that its colour is already lightening to show that it's fatiguing, and you can see it's slowing down as well. It is actually slowing down. So it's starting to get tired. Now, these are guys with average training. Units with better training will go further. But look, no, he's now stopped, and in fact he's cancelled his order because he's just completely knackered out. and you can see the colour differences. So hopefully that will allow a player to see what's going on the fatigue front. And you can see this is a lot light orange. Hopefully this translates well on the video, but it's hard to tell. Both units taking cohesion damage, although the unit that's run the further is taking a lot more cohesion damage. And then if we let the turn run, you'll find that he'll start to recover and lose fatigue and then regain cohesion at the same time. And this unit here is starting to lighten up, so he's starting to get fatigued as well. Look at the cohesion on that though. You wouldn't want to engage in combat with that kind of cohesion damage, because yeah, you're not going to do too well basically. So here we go, it's advancing. So yeah, he still hasn't made it, and look at all that damage. Now if we go back to telematics app, now we should see some of the details. Now this is a development application, so it's a little bit clunky, but it kind of does its job. Telematics is designed to be sent at the lowest priority. It doesn't need to be high priority. This is why it's still sending data across. Although I have noticed that if I put this telematics app on a different machine, I get the data in real time, so this must be the way .NET handles communications on the same machine. Possibly, I don't know. But anyway, what you can see here is Infantry 1, he's topped out at fatigue at 100%, whereas at the same time Infantry Unit 2 is at about 40% fatigue. So quite a difference, and the only difference between the two units is this guy here is wearing heavy armour and has a large shield, and it makes quite a lot of difference to how far you can go. You can see the cohesion as well. Infantry Unit 1's cohesion drops to about sort of 20, whereas Infantry Unit 2's, their cohesion's actually dropped down to 0. Or at least it's heading that way. Now you see, as we go into the second turn, Infantry Unit 1, it's starting to lose its fatigue. In other words, it's regaining its ability to fight, and its cohesion should start to... oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. No wonder why. That's the same as that. That needs to be Infantry Unit 1. Come back. Wondered why that was so low. Let's select 1. Right, that's better. So here we see Infantry Unit 1, the cohesion kind of dropped down to around sort of 60%, and now it's regaining it whilst it's resting. So its fatigue is going down, its cohesion's going up. Infantry Unit 2, cohesion's just dropped to the floor, and its fatigue is going up and up and up. It hasn't quite reached 100%, but it is going up. Now obviously, if Infantry Unit 2 was to engage at that point, it would have a really bad time. So yeah, in the bad old days, fatigue used to just jump right off the scale. You could keep piling on orders to your units, and although they'd get slower and slower and slower, they'd end up with really unrealistic fatigue levels, whereas now it's capped off and you can also view it. But you can see this unit's regained some colour to show that it is regaining fatigue. So got the fatigue stuff in. Now I'll show you some of the column movement stuff. Now, column movement, I'm referring to the kind of column movement you use when you're generally going on roads, but you can also use it cross country as well. So we're going to set this up. And column movement, you don't wheel or move around, you tend to follow a column basically where you need to go. Now in the Army editor you can specify how wide a column is. I think it defaults to 6 entities wide, so in case of cavalry 6 horses wide. And the only bit I've coded so far is the stripping off and also the rebuilding of the unit at the other end. This part, the actual column itself, there is code to display that, but it's not fully implemented yet, so you're not going to see that. So what you're going to see right now is the unit stripping down properly, and that was quite a lot of work to put that in. So anyway, let's hit play. So here you can see it stripping down. Now that took a lot of effort to put in, and also to have the text clip properly and show as well, because one of the things I realised was that a unit that's effectively becoming part of a column formation, it needs to have the same text as, I guess, the original formation. And with the original code, that was impossible to do, which is why I had to go this entire rigmarole of redesigning the text system, redesigning the model system. But the results are that it can copy the text of the originating unit, and it can clip it very accurately, because I now have accurate placement. Now, once the column system's finished, as these units strip, you'll see them moving into the column and then moving down the column, and then you'll see it rebuilding the unit at the other end. It's also a very flexible system in that, for instance, infantry 3, I've set it up with the standard default column movement of 6 men wide. But infantry 4, I've set them up so they've actually got a choice, and I've given them a standard and a narrow column, and you can set this up any way you want. Now, narrow column here is only 3 men wide. So if we run that, so you can see it's about half the width that's coming off, because it's only 3 men wide as opposed to the 6 men wide on that side. And one thing that you do notice is it does make a difference in terms of, I guess, tactical gameplay, because when you look at these two units, you can see that because this is stripping off by 6 men at a time as opposed to 3 on this side, this unit is actually moving into column faster than this unit here, and of course his column movement will in effect be achieved at a faster rate, simply because the column pipeline, once that gets implemented, it's going to consist of troops that are 6 wide as opposed to on this side where the troops are only 3 wide. So this unit will be able to strip down, travel in column, and get to the other end and rebuild a lot faster than this unit. Now, there are pros and cons, especially for road movement. Roads, part of their definition is their width, and if your unit's column is wider than the road, it will have to strip down to fit the road, and that will slow it down quite considerably. So it's not a case of making your units really wide column wise for efficiency. There is a balance to strike, and of course historically different formations had I guess different column widths. Now, the other thing added to this system, the other thing that's part of column movement and was a pain in the ass to implement, it was integration to Kronos. Now, for those who don't know, Kronos is the subsystem of Ancient Armies that deals with time. And in fact, I actually found a bug in that when you play a turn, it wasn't, I discovered later, it wasn't using Kronos to play back the turn, only during replays. So as a result, I was finding that the time was kind of changing its speed. Sometimes it would be slow, at times it would be too fast. And I looked at the code, I was like, oh my god, it's not using Kronos. I had all this extra code in for no reason at all, so I stripped that out. And now playback, standard game playback uses Kronos, as does the replay system. So now you get hyper accurate timing. So that was a bug I hadn't noticed. Anyway, one of the issues, of course, with putting together the column movement is it has to be integrated with Kronos, has to be integrated with line of sight. That bit isn't done. The Kronos integration is there, so if we open up the replay system, you can see that it's fully replay compliant. So do that, and then you can hit play and then kind of watch it all doing its stuff. And stop that, move it a bit further forward, and again hit play. So yeah, it's fully integrated with Kronos and the replay system, which is what you're going to need. But it's one of those development things that you don't think about. You think, yeah, I'm going to add column movement, but it has to integrate with all the other subsystems, like in this case Kronos, which is a bit of a pain. It will have to integrate with line of sight as well, although I know how I'm going to do that. It's just going to be a bit of a pain to implement. So yeah, that's I guess some of the new features that are in there. Column movement is taking time to do, a lot of time, especially with the fact I've had to refactor so much of the code, but I think it's key to a lot of the battles, like Trebia, and there's a few others where it does have an impact, and column movement's faster as well. So when you're doing battles where the unit, actual armies is deploying, you need to be able to model column movement properly. And I don't think there are many computer games that actually model proper column movement. I could be wrong though. I mean, if you see any, let me know, because I'd be interested in seeing them. But most tend to just move units around as they are, or alternatively move them sideways to represent column movement. Whereas here, because I want an accurate simulation, I'm kind of going down to this level of detail. So I'm really happy with the unit scaling and the fact that regardless of how small the units are, like these Triary, they're tiny. In fact, if I go back to the flatten mode, we can get the scale up. We can see just how tiny they are. So if you look bottom left, so that's about 20 meters in width, a little bit under 20 meters for 60 men, 3 deep. So really tiny units. And for games that don't properly model formation sizes, you never really get to see the relative sizes. Whereas in my mind, I always thought Triary were about the same size as the Hastati and Princeps. That's not the case, because they had half the people, and they're packed at a closer density as well, because they fought in a phalanx-like formation as opposed to these guys. But anyway, that's it for this video. So if you have any questions, post it in the YouTube channel, and thank you for taking the time to watch. Goodbye.